My name is Lauren Mitchell, and today I learned that a cluster of cells in my body has declared war. Stage 2, the doctor said, his voice carefully neutral, like he'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Now I'm sitting in a hospital room that smells like antiseptic and wintergreen gum, watching a drip bag swing gently on its metal pole. The gown scratches against my shoulders. Someone thought polyester was a good idea for sick people. My phone lies face down on the tray table, screen dark. An hour ago, 60 long, echoing minutes, I sent a message to the family group chat. Just diagnosed with cancer. At St. Luke's. Room 412. That's all I wrote. I didn't bother with emojis or soft edges. Nothing. Not even the usual thumbs up my brother sends when he doesn't know what else to say. Through the window, I can see the city's late morning shimmer. A taxi splashes through leftover rain, and for a second I envy its urgency, its purpose. My heart, meanwhile, drums a rhythm of hurt and stubborn pride. I wonder if anyone is silently typing, then erasing. I wonder if they've already decided that silence is safer. I pull the thin blanket higher and straighten my spine. If they choose not to come, I will choose how this story is told. And maybe, just maybe, how it ends. For years earlier, I stood at the edge of my parents' driveway in Madison, Wisconsin, a single duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The late summer air smelled of freshly cut grass and resentment. "Lauren, you're being ridiculous," my mother said from the porch. Her arms were folded tight across her chest, a human padlock. "You can still apply to the state program. There's no need to chase some big city dream." I kept my grip on the duffel strap, fingers aching. "It's a journalism fellowship, Mom. It's everything I've worked for." My father didn't even look at me. He just stared at the wooden floorboards, his jaw clenched like a vice. The silence between us was louder than any argument. "We raised you better than this," my mother went on. "Running off to Chicago with no safety net. How do you think that reflects on this family?" A lump rose in my throat, hot and sharp. I wanted to scream that my life was not a PR campaign. Instead, I swallowed the words, feeling them burn all the way down. Then, like a lifeline, I remembered Grandma June's locket, still warm against my collarbone. She'd given it to me the night before, slipping it into my palm with a wink. Inside was a tiny scrap of paper in her slanted handwriting. "Go where your story takes you." I touched the locket now, letting its steady weight ground me. "I'm not running away," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm running toward something." My mother's lips tightened, a straight line of disapproval. My father turned, retreating into the house without a word. For a heartbeat, I hesitated, half hoping someone would call me back. No one did. I hoisted the duffel higher and stepped off the driveway. The sound of gravel crunching under my sneakers became a drumbeat of resolve. The sky over Madison burned gold and pink, a sunset that felt like a dare. By the time I reached the bus stop, my cheeks were dry. I slipped a hand inside my jacket and closed my fingers around the locket. Grandma June's words pulsed in my chest. "Go where your story takes you." And with that, I boarded the bus toward Chicago, toward a life that would belong only to me. Chicago greeted me with a wind that felt like both a warning and a welcome. I rented a studio apartment above a corner bakery in Lincoln Square, where the smell of fresh bread seeped through the floorboards every morning like a promise that things could still rise. The first months were brutal. The fellowship paid a stipend barely enough for groceries. I worked late at the city desk of the Tribune, chasing stories that kept me awake long after deadline. My fingers were permanently ink-stained. My shoes wore thin from pounding sidewalks for interviews. More than once I wondered if my parents were right, if this was reckless, if independence was just another word for lonely. On those nights, I'd thumb the locket at my throat and reread Grandma June's faded note. "Go where your story takes you." The paper edges were softening from my touch, as though the words were being worn into me. One evening, while covering a town hall meeting in a church basement, I met Margaret Klein, a veteran investigative reporter with silver-streaked hair and an infectious laugh that cut through the bureaucratic drone. She leaned over as I scribbled quotes and whispered, You've got the look of someone who still believes the truth matters. Don't lose that. Margaret became my quiet mentor. She tore apart my drafts with red pen precision, then bought me coffee and made me rewrite until my sentences sang. She pushed me to pitch bigger stories: corruption in the city's zoning board, misuse of public funds. The day my byline landed on the front page, she raised her paper cup in a mock toast. I wanted to text my family to hear pride in their voices. Instead, I sent a single photo of the newspaper to the group chat without a caption. They responded with a generic, "nice work," and a string of heart emojis that felt like placeholders for words they couldn't or wouldn't say. So I stopped sharing details. When I won my first National Journalism Award 2 years later, I celebrated with Margaret and a handful of newsroom friends at a dimly lit bar. My parents never knew. The more I achieved, the less I felt the need for their approval. I built a life stitched together by deadlines and late-night coffees, by colleagues who became family. Financially, too, things shifted. My first book deal, an exposé on political backroom deals, paid enough to turn my little studio into a proper apartment with tall windows and a balcony that caught the morning sun. I furnished it piece by piece: a deep blue velvet couch, a reclaimed oak writing desk, a wall of framed front pages. Every item was a quiet declaration: I did this. Sometimes I'd pause in the doorway, lock it warm against my skin, and marvel that the girl who left Madison with a single duffel now owned a view of the city skyline. I never told my family how successful I'd become. It was easier, somehow, to let them imagine me just getting by. Until the day my diagnosis shattered that careful silence and forced every hidden triumph into the light. 3 days after I sent the message, the hospital room door finally creaked open. I had almost convinced myself no one would come. My brother, Ethan, stepped in first, his baseball cap twisting nervously in his hands. Behind him, my mother followed, carrying a bouquet of grocery store carnations that already looked tired. My father came last, shoulders squared but eyes darting anywhere except mine. The silence was heavy enough to bend the four-pole. You should have called," my mother said at last, her voice a notch too high. Texting something like this. I texted. I cut in. Because that's how we communicate now, isn't it? Through group chats and half-read messages. Ethan shifted from foot to foot. We didn't know what to say. The truth sat between us like an uninvited guest. They hadn't known what to say for years, not since I boarded that bus to Chicago and chose a life they didn't understand. I took a slow breath, the scent of carnations mingling with the sterile hospital air. I asked the nurse to schedule my discharge for this afternoon. I said, "There's something I need to show you before the next round of tests." Their confusion followed me like a shadow as we left St. Luke's and climbed into a rideshare. No one spoke during the 20-minute drive downtown. When we arrived at my apartment, I pushed open the door to the life I had built in their absence. Sunlight spilled across the velvet blue couch, the oak writing desk, the wall of framed front pages, each one a headline from investigations that had shaken the city. A glint of evening light caught the edge of my journalism award on the bookshelf. My father stopped short. Ethan's cap slipped from his fingers. My mother pressed the carnations closer to her chest, as if they could shield her from the truth blooming in front of her. "This is yours," my mother finally whispered. "All of it," I said. My voice didn't need to rise. The room spoke for me. I walked to the desk and picked up my latest book, the dust jacket crisp beneath my fingers. "Second printing," I said, almost lightly. "The first sold out in 2 weeks." My father's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Ethan's eyes roamed the wall of headlines: political scandals, corporate fraud, the kind of stories that ripple far beyond a single byline. "I built this," I continued, "without phone calls returned, without holiday visits, without any of you." My mother blinked hard. "Lauren, we didn't know you were." She gestured vaguely toward the awards, the apartment, the skyline beyond the window. "This successful." I set the book down and faced them. "You didn't want to know. I sent pictures, updates. You gave me hearts and thumbs-ups, like that was enough." The hurt in my chest wasn't raw anymore. It was polished, like a stone I had carried so long it had lost its jagged edges. Ethan cleared his throat. We thought you'd struggle. And when you didn't ask for help, we figured maybe you didn't need us. I needed a family, I said quietly. You chose silence instead. For a long moment, no one spoke. The city hummed beyond the balcony, the distant sound of a siren rising like a lament. Then my father finally met my gaze. Lauren, he said, the single word rough with something that might have been regret. I held his eyes, feeling the weight of every unreturned call, every holiday card signed only with names. For once, I wasn't the one waiting for acceptance. The power had shifted. I straightened, the locket at my throat catching the last of the sunset. Now, I said, let's talk about what comes next. I motioned for them to sit. The evening light washed the room in gold, turning the framed headlines into quiet witnesses. For years, I've wondered if it was me, if I left wrong, if I made it too easy to forget me. But standing here now, I see it clearly. I didn't disappear. You just stopped looking. My mother's lips trembled. Lauren, we never meant. I held up a hand, gentle but firm. I'm not here for apologies. Not the easy kind, anyway. If you want to be part of my life, there are things that have to change. Ethan shifted on the couch, eyes downcast. My father's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. First, I said, honesty. No more pretending everything is fine while we trade polite emojis. If you're scared, say you're scared. If you're angry, say that too. But no more silence. My mother swallowed hard and nodded. Second, respect my work. Journalism isn't a hobby. It's not a phase. It's my calling. Stop dismissing it as if it's some risky detour. You don't have to love every story I write, but you'll stop belittling the life I chose. Ethan glanced up, guilt softening his features. We can do that. Third, I said, touching the locket at my throat, show up. Not just for me, for each other. Family isn't a group chat, it's presence. Holidays, phone calls, real conversations. If you want to stay in my life while I fight this illness, you show up. The room held its breath. My father finally spoke, voice low. And if we fail? I met his eyes that had once looked past me on a Madison driveway. Then you'll still be my relatives, but not my family. There's a difference. The words didn't sting the way I once feared they might. They simply landed, true and steady. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can do that, Lauren. I want to. My mother's fingers clutched the tired carnations until a petal fell. I don't know how to fix all the years, she whispered. But I want to try. Please let me try. Something inside me eased, like a knot finally loosening. This isn't about fixing the past, I said. It's about choosing the future. You don't have to be perfect, just present. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different, less like a wall, more like a doorway. I touched the locket, feeling the curve of its familiar metal. Grandma June's words pulsed beneath my fingertips. Go where your story takes you. And for the first time in years, I felt my story bending back toward home. Not the house I left, but the connection we might still build. The weeks that followed didn't heal decades overnight, but small gestures began to thread their way into the cracks. Ethan started calling every evening on his commute home. Sometimes we talked about nothing, traffic, baseball, the weather, but his voice in my ear was a rhythm I didn't realize I'd missed. My mother began mailing me recipes, handwritten in her looping cursive, each one tucked into an envelope with a little note. Thought this might cheer you. Even my father, who had always hidden behind silence, surprised me. One Saturday morning, he showed up at my apartment with a stack of crossword puzzles and said, "Heard these keep your brain sharp during treatments." He stayed an hour, circling clues, and when he left, I noticed he'd folded the half-finished page into his pocket, as if carrying a piece of me with him. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, old habits of distance creeping in. But this time, they didn't retreat into silence. They tried. And trying was enough. Late one night after chemo, I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, the city glowing beneath me. I touched the locket at my throat, its metal cool against my skin. Inside, Grandma June's tiny note was still there, the edges softer now but the words as fierce as ever. Go where your story takes you. For so long, I thought my story was about leaving, about proving I could survive without them. But maybe it was also about circling back, not in surrender, but in strength. I wasn't the girl standing on a Madison driveway anymore. I was a woman who had built a life, written truths into the world, and faced illness with her head unbowed. And now, I was someone who could choose connection, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. I drew in the cool night air and whispered, more to myself than anyone else. My story doesn't end with silence. It ends with strength and begins again with grace.